The heir who ended the silence. The villa went dark for only 6 seconds before emergency lights washed the study in red, but 6 seconds was enough for Emma Carter to understand how quickly a house of marble and power could become a trap. Outside, gunfire cracked across the south gate. Shouts echoed through the corridors. Security radios burst with static. Somewhere below, glass shattered. Lorenzo Moretti moved faster than thought, dragging Emma behind the heavy oak desk, as Dante slammed the study doors shut and barked orders into his radio. Chiara dropped to the floor near the fireplace, pale and shaking. Rosa whispered a prayer. The private doctor clutched the DNA report to her chest as if paper could stop bullets. Emma's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her burned palms. 1 hour ago, she had been a housekeeper trying to survive a name that might not be hers. Now the first DNA result had confirmed what everyone feared. Maternal Belandi match, paternal Moretti markers. Enough proof to make her valuable. Enough proof to make her dangerous. Enough proof to bring armed men to the gates before the full report even arrived. Lorenzo crouched beside her, one hand braced near her shoulder, his body positioned between her and the door. "Are you hit? No? Are you sure?" Emma almost laughed despite the terror. "I think I would notice." "Not always." She looked at him. "Is this really the time to argue with me?" "I am not arguing." "You are absolutely arguing." The corner of his mouth almost moved, which was absurd, with gunfire outside and bloodline wars crashing into the house. Then another shot struck the window. Glass spiderwebbed but held. Lorenzo's face turned cold again. "Dante." "Armored glass," Dante said. "We're secure for now." For now is not a plan. Working on it. Emma gripped the torn shipping manifest. "Who is attacking?" Dante's radio crackled before he could answer. "South wall breached by 3 vehicles. Belandi markings on 1. Chiara's head snapped up. "Belandi?" Emma's stomach dropped. The family she supposedly shared blood with had just sent men to kill her. Or capture her. Neither thought comforted her. Lorenzo's expression darkened into something almost inhumanly calm. "Carlo Belandi." Dante nodded grimly. "Likely." Emma remembered the will. The heir carries the blood of Moretti and Belandi, and therefore the power to end the feud. If Carlo Belandi wanted the feud to continue, then Emma was not an heir to him. She was a threat. A living bridge that men on both sides needed broken. The attack lasted 23 minutes. Emma counted without meaning to, because fear made numbers easier than feelings. 23 minutes of muffled gunfire, shouted orders, footsteps pounding past the study, Lorenzo issuing commands in low deadly phrases, Dante coordinating counterattacks, Chiara crying silently near the hearth, and Emma realizing with icy clarity that people were willing to kill over blood she had never asked to carry. Then abruptly, the gunfire stopped. Silence returned, heavy and unnatural. Dante listened to his radio, then looked at Lorenzo. Contained. 2 attackers dead. 4 captured. 1 vehicle escaped toward the east road. Lorenzo stood slowly. "Bring me a prisoner." Emma's pulse leapt. "Here?" Lorenzo looked down at her. "No." His gaze softened slightly. "Not here." He turned to Dante. "Lower hall." Emma should have stayed in the study. Every reasonable part of her knew that. Instead, when Lorenzo moved toward the door, she stood too. His head turned immediately. "Emma, I need to know." "No." "They came because of me. They came because cowards fear what they cannot control. That still means me." His jaw tightened. "You were shot at." "So were you. I am accustomed to it." That is not reassuring. For a moment, they stared at each other, while everyone else pretended not to watch. Then Chiara spoke unexpectedly from the floor. "Let her hear it." Lorenzo's eyes cut to her. Chiara swallowed but continued. "If she is Amelia, keeping her ignorant is how everyone controlled her before." Silence followed. Emma looked at Chiara, surprised. The socialite looked away, ashamed or afraid or both. Lorenzo said nothing for several seconds. Then he opened the door. "Behind me." Emma exhaled. "You really need new phrases. Survive tonight and make a list." They descended into the lower hall. where one captured attacker knelt between two guards, hands bound, blood at his temple. He wore no official insignia, but a silver ring on his finger bore the Belandi crest. Carlo's men? Lorenzo stood before him like a judgment carved in black. Who sent you? The man spat blood onto the marble. No one. Lorenzo's expression did not change. Wrong answer. Emma had no desire to watch what might happen next. She stepped forward before Lorenzo could move. Did Carlo Belandi send you? The man looked at her for the first time. His expression shifted. Recognition. Hatred. Fear. So it is true, he muttered. Emma's skin prickled. What is true? The lost girl. Silence tightened across the hall. Lorenzo stepped closer, voice lethal. Careful. The prisoner laughed weakly. She doesn't even know, does she? They dressed her in servant black and had her cleaning floors in the house she could split in half. Emma felt the words hit every person in the room. Split in half. Lorenzo's gaze sharpened. What does that mean? The man looked at Emma again. Read the full will. We did. No. He smiled through blood. You read the warning, not the power clause. Dante immediately turned toward Lorenzo. Emma's heart began pounding for a new reason. The power clause. Lorenzo's father had hidden more than identity, more than inheritance. Lorenzo turned to Dante. Bring the will. Minutes later, the document lay open on the lower hall table, while guards held the prisoner nearby. Lorenzo scanned the final pages with Dante. Emma stood close enough to see, but not close enough to understand the legal language quickly. Her eyes kept catching words. Reconciliation authority, dual bloodline, emergency succession, voting suspension, feud arbitration, trust control. Lorenzo stopped reading. His face went still. What? Emma whispered. Dante answered softly, because Lorenzo seemed temporarily unable to. The will gives Emilia Moretti Belandi emergency authority over both contested family trusts if her identity is verified. Emma stared at him. I don't know what that means. Lorenzo finally looked at her. It means you can block the Vitali marriage contract. Chiara inhaled sharply. Marco would lose leverage. Chiara's family would lose control. And? Emma asked, though dread already filled her. Dante continued. You can suspend hostile transfers between Moretti and Belandi assets. The prisoner laughed. She can stop the war money. Emma's stomach turned. War money? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Funds used to maintain armed pressure between the families. Emma looked between them. So people are killing each other because accounts keep paying them to? The prisoner's smile widened. And because men enjoy old hatred when it makes them rich, the simplicity of it sickened her. Blood feud as business model. Grief as currency. Emma looked at the will again. And I can stop that? Lorenzo held her chaza. If the full DNA report confirms you, yes. The hall seemed to tilt. The housekeeper everyone had mocked. The woman Chiara called useful but not desirable. The servant Bellini watched for 11 months. Might hold legal authority powerful enough to cut funding from a 30-year mafia war. No wonder Bellini had orders to terminate before council. No wonder Marco burned the record. No wonder Carlo Belandi sent men the moment preliminary proof surfaced. Emma's voice came out barely audible. I don't want this. Lorenzo stepped closer. I know. No, you don't. I don't want power. I don't want trusts. I don't want men with guns deciding whether I exist. I don't want to be Emilia, if Emilia means everyone around me becomes a target. Lorenzo's expression changed. In front of guards, prisoners, Chiara, Dante, and the entire trembling household, he said quietly, Then I will make sure they fear targeting anyone around you. The words were not comfort. They were a promise of violence, and somehow, beneath that, a promise of care. The prisoner sneered. You can't protect her from both families. Lorenzo turned slowly toward him. You misunderstand. The hall went silent. Lorenzo raised his voice, not shouting, but speaking with enough authority that servants gathered at the stairwell, guards at the doors, and family members emerging from hidden corners all heard him. Emma Carter, Emilia Moretti Belandi, or whatever name she chooses, is under my protection. Emma stopped breathing. Chiara stared. Dante lowered his eyes in approval. Lorenzo continued, not because of the will, not because of the trusts, not because men in old families suddenly find her useful. His gaze moved across every face. Because she found the truth and did not use it for herself. Because she stood in fire to save a name others tried to burn. Because this house ignored her, mocked her, and used her silence, and she still saw more clearly than all of us. Emma's throat tightened so painfully she could barely breathe. Lorenzo looked at her then, and his voice lowered just enough to become more intimate while still carrying through the hall. No one touches her. No one threatens her. No one speaks of her as property. Anyone who forgets this answers to me. For one suspended second, the entire villa seemed to bow to the force of that declaration. Emma hated how much it affected her. Loved it too, though she was not ready to admit that even to herself. The moment shattered when the prisoner laughed again. Beautiful speech. But Carlo already has Bellini. Lorenzo's expression sharpened. What did you say? The man smiled. Bellini didn't run from you. He ran to Carlo. And he brought the metal box. Silence. The metal box from Lorenzo's study. The missing proof. Emma's pulse spiked. What's in it? Lorenzo's face hardened. The original identity packet. The prisoner shook his head. More than that. Dante stepped forward. Explain. The prisoner's eyes fixed on Emma. The box contains the one thing that can break her claim before the council. Emma's blood went cold. What thing? He smiled wider. Her mother's confession. The hall froze. Anne Carter, her mother, the woman who raised her, the woman who lied and loved and carried secrets across oceans. Emma felt suddenly unsteady. Lorenzo moved toward her immediately, but she lifted a hand to stop him. She needed to stand on her own, even if standing hurt. What confession? She whispered. The prisoner looked delighted to deliver the wound. That she was paid to steal you. Emma's world cracked. No one spoke. No one moved. Somewhere above them, rain began again against the villa windows. Lorenzo's voice turned deadly. Take him away! Guards dragged the prisoner out, but Emma barely heard him laughing. Paid to steal you! Paid to steal you! Paid to steal you! The words folded themselves around every memory she had of Anne Carter. Bedtime stories, soft hands, hospital rooms, birthday candles, the way her mother cried whenever Emma asked where she came from. Lorenzo stepped closer. Careful now. Emma. She shook her head. Don't. We don't know if it's true. But you think it could be. His silence hurt because it was honest. Emma looked at the will on the table. The paper everyone wanted. The paper that said she had power. The paper that could not tell her whether the woman she loved had stolen her. I need the box. Lorenzo nodded. We'll get it. No. Her voice steadied slowly. I need to get it. His eyes darkened. Absolutely not. If Bellini has my mother's confession, then I need to hear it from him. Bellini will lie to save himself. Then I'll know. Lorenzo's jaw tightened with the effort of restraint. Carlo will use you as bait. He already is. The truth hung between them. Emma was no longer only protected inside Lorenzo's world. She was the center of the board. And somewhere beyond the rain-dark roads of Sicily, Bellini carried the metal box that held the last piece of her past. Dante's phone rang. He answered, listened, and looked toward Lorenzo. Message from Carlo Bellandi. Lorenzo's face turned cold. Play it. Dante put the audio on speaker. Carlo's voice filled the hall, smooth, older, amused. Lorenzo, you have something that belongs to my bloodline. I have something that belongs to hers. Bring Amelia to the old citrus warehouse tomorrow night, and perhaps the girl will finally learn whether her mother was a saint or a thief. The message ended. Silence remained. Emma looked at Lorenzo. He looked back with the expression of a man already preparing for war. But for the first time, Emma did not hide behind him. She placed her bandaged hand over the secret will and whispered, Then we go get my truth. The confession in the warehouse. By sunrise, the Moretti villa no longer felt like a home, a fortress, or even a battlefield. It felt like a locked room filled with people waiting to see which truth would bleed first. The attack at the south gate had been contained, but not without cost. 2 guards wounded, 1 kitchen boy grazed by glass, 3 Belandi men dead on the road outside the iron gates, 4 prisoners downstairs refusing to talk until Lorenzo Moretti entered the room, after which 2 discovered speech very quickly, and the other 2 decided silence might have been wiser. Emma Carter heard none of the interrogations directly, but she saw enough in the faces of the men leaving the lower level to know that Lorenzo's patience had ended long before dawn. She sat in his study beside the secret will, her bandaged hands resting carefully on her lap, while the first DNA report waited under a paperweight and the prisoner's words kept repeating in her mind. Her mother's confession. Paid to steal you. Ann Carter's face stared at Emma from the little framed photograph Lorenzo had quietly ordered brought from her staff room before the room was sealed for security. Her mother looked tired in the picture, smiling softly beside a hospital window, one hand pressed over her heart the way she always did when she was trying not to cry. Emma wanted to hate her. It would have been easier, cleaner, but love did not disappear just because truth arrived with blood on its shoes. Lorenzo stood near the window, speaking quietly with Dante. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled, a bruise darkening along one cheekbone from the chaos of the gate attack. He looked controlled, but Emma had begun to recognize the difference between his calm and his restraint. Calm was natural. Restraint was a blade held by the edge. "Carlo will expect us to bring her," Dante said. "Carlo expects many things," Lorenzo replied. "He rarely receives all of them." Emma looked up. "I'm going." Both men turned. Dante's expression became carefully blank. Lorenzo's became exactly what she expected. Dangerous. No. Emma sighed. "We keep having this conversation because you keep suggesting reckless things. Carlo asked for me. Carlo is not in charge. He has the metal box. I will take it. And if he destroys it before you do?" Lorenzo said nothing. That was the first sign that her argument had landed. Emma stood carefully, ignoring the sting in her palms. "That box may contain my mother's confession. It may contain proof that she stole me. It may contain proof that she saved me. I don't know, but I need to know." Lorenzo stepped closer. "And if what is inside hurts you?" The question was not cold. That made it worse. Emma's voice softened despite herself. "Then it hurts me. But at least it will be mine." For several seconds, silence held the room. Then Chiara spoke from the doorway. "She's right." Lorenzo closed his eyes briefly, as if personally betrayed by the universe. Chiara stood at the threshold, pale but composed, wearing a dark dress with no jewelry except the absence of her rose ring. She looked younger without her cruelty, polished into armor. "Carlo wants a performance," she said. "If Emma isn't there, he'll change the stage." Emma studied her carefully. "Why are you helping?" Chiara's gaze dropped to the floor. "Because I spent years trying to marry a man who looked through me and used cruelty to feel less invisible. The honesty surprised everyone. And because Marco and Carlo plan to use me too, I would rather be ashamed than stupid twice." Dante murmured, "Progress." Chiara ignored him. "Carlo doesn't just want Emma. He wants the will activated or destroyed. If she has authority over both trusts, then her choice determines whether the old war continues." Lorenzo looked at Emma. "There may be another way." Emma touched the secret will. "There wasn't for the people who died before this." The warehouse exchange was set for midnight at an abandoned citrus packing facility outside Palermo. All day, the villa prepared for war under the disguise of negotiation. Dante mapped exits, tunnels, loading ways, sniper angles, hidden drainage routes, and every possible ambush point. Lorenzo's men intercepted Belandi communications. Chiara provided old Vitali contact codes Carlo might still trust. Rosa packed food Emma could not eat and kissed her forehead before anyone could object. The final DNA confirmation had not arrived yet, but the preliminary evidence had already changed everything. Emma was no longer simply a witness. She was leverage, bloodline, threat, bridge, and target. She hated every word except one. Bridge. Bridges did not belong to either side. They connected what violence tried to keep apart. Before they left, Lorenzo found her in the gallery where the hidden will had been discovered. The portrait of Don Vittorio had been removed from the wall, leaving the concealed compartment exposed. Emma stood in front of the empty space, thinking of the night when her life split open because a painting hung slightly crooked. "Do you regret finding it?" Lorenzo asked. Emma did not turn. Every hour, he came to stand beside her. And no. The answer felt strange and true. Lorenzo looked at the open wall. My father hid this because he feared the people closest to him. Was he right? Yes. Did he love you? That question seemed to catch him off guard. He did not answer immediately. In the way men like him knew how, Emma looked at him then. That sounds lonely. Something shifted in his eyes. It was. For a second, the gallery, the war, the will, everything faded into the quiet space between two people shaped by other people's secrets. Emma wanted to reach for him. She did not. Lorenzo noticed that too. He always noticed too much. When we enter tonight, he said, voice lower, you stay close. Behind you? His mouth almost curved. Preferably. I hate that, I know. Say it anyway and I may start charging you. Name your price. Her heart stumbled at the way his eyes held hers. My truth. His expression sobered. Then, that is what you get. The old citrus warehouse smelled of mold, dust, and rotting sweetness. Moonlight filtered through broken skylights. Wooden crates lay stacked like coffins beneath rusted beams. Old conveyor belts stood silent. The Mediterranean wind moved through cracked walls with a low whistling sound. Emma entered beside Lorenzo, not behind him, though she suspected he allowed this only because Dante's men surrounded the building from positions Carlo could not see. Chiara came too, hidden in a second vehicle against Lorenzo's wishes and Emma's reluctant approval. If Carlo sees me, Chiara had said, he may talk more, Lorenzo had replied, or shoot faster. Chiara had smiled thinly. Then perhaps stand near me. Now Carlo Belandi waited at the center of the warehouse with 6 armed men, Bellini beside him, and the metal box resting on a wooden crate between them. Carlo was older than Emma expected, silver-haired, elegant, wearing a dark coat and a smile that made him look like someone's charming grandfather until his eyes moved. Those eyes held no warmth, only calculation. Bellini looked smaller away from the villa, his authority drained now that he was no longer bullying maids in corridors. When he saw Emma, he looked away first. That gave her more satisfaction than she expected. Carlo spread his arms. Emilia. Emma flinched. Lorenzo stepped half an inch closer. Carlo noticed and smiled wider. Ah, protective already. Dangerous attachment for a woman who may belong to both sides. Emma forced herself to speak. I belong to myself. Carlo's smile sharpened. Anne Carter taught you defiance. Interesting. Her heart squeezed. Did she steal me? Bellini's face twitched. Carlo looked delighted. Straight to the wound. I admire that. Lorenzo's voice came cold. The box. Carlo tapped it with gloved fingers. The girl first. No. Then we have nothing to discuss. Carlo lifted a small recorder from his pocket. Unless she wants to hear her mother's voice. Emma forgot to breathe. Bellini stared at the floor. Carlo pressed play. Static crackled. Then Anne Carter's voice filled the warehouse, younger, shaking, unmistakable. My name is Anne Carter. I took the child called Emilia from the Moretti villa on the night of October 17th. I was paid to leave Italy and never return. Emma's knees nearly gave way. Lorenzo's hand brushed her back, steadying without trapping. The recording continued. If this is ever found, they will say I stole her for money. That is not the whole truth. Emma's eyes burned. Carlo's smile faded slightly, as if he disliked this part. Anne's voice trembled. Vittorio Moretti paid me, yes, but not to steal her. To save her, the Belandi Council had voted to eliminate the child before she could become a claim. The Moretti cousins wanted her hidden until they could use her. No one wanted Emilia to live as a girl. They wanted her as a weapon or a corpse. So I took the money because money made the lie believable, and I ran because loving her made staying impossible. A broken sound escaped Emma. The warehouse blurred. Anne continued. Softer now. I raised her as Emma, because Amelia would have been hunted. I lied because every birthday she survived meant the lie had worked one more year. If she hates me when she learns the truth, let her. But let her be alive to hate me. The recording ended. Silence filled the warehouse. Emma pressed a hand over her mouth. Her mother had lied. Her mother had taken money. Her mother had saved her. All of it true. All of it unbearable. Lorenzo's voice was low near her ear. Breathe. She did. Raggedly. Carlo slipped the recorder back into his pocket. Touching, isn't it? The sainted thief. Unfortunately, the confession still proves you were removed illegally. Your claim can be challenged. Emma looked at him through tears, but not erased. Carlo's eyes narrowed. No, not if the will stands. Lorenzo said, Then give us the box. Carlo laughed. You think I brought the original? Lorenzo, you disappoint me. Bellini shifted nervously. Emma noticed. So did Chiara, who stepped from the shadows near the loading bay before anyone could stop her. Carlo's smile vanished. Chiara Vitelli. Carlo, you chose poorly. Chiara lifted her chin. For years. I'm correcting it. Bellini's eyes darted toward her sleeve. Too late. Chiara pulled out the real metal box key. Looking for this? The warehouse erupted. Carlo shouted. One of his men raised a gun toward Chiara. Emma screamed her name. Lorenzo fired before the man could pull the trigger. Dante's men stormed through the side doors. Gunfire cracked across the warehouse. Carlo grabbed the metal box and ran toward the conveyor line. Bellini tried to follow, but Chiara tackled him with a fury that seemed powered by years of humiliation and fear. Emma moved without thinking, chasing Carlo between stacks of crates. Lorenzo shouted behind her, Emma. She kept running because Carlo had her mother's voice, her past, her proof in the box. Carlo reached the loading platform and turned with a gun in one hand, the box in the other. Stop. Emma stopped. Rain blew through the broken wall behind him. Lorenzo appeared at the end of the aisle, gun raised, eyes colder than she had ever seen. Carlo pressed the gun toward the box. One bullet through this, and her counsel claim bleeds out. Emma's heart hammered. Why do you hate me so much? Carlo's face hardened. Because you are proof that old men died for nothing, because peace ruins profitable wars, because the moment you stand between Moretti and Belandi, every man who built his fortune on hatred loses power. There it was, the truth beneath every lie. Emma stepped closer slowly. Then you aren't afraid of my blood. Carlo's jaw tightened. You're afraid of my choice. His finger twitched. Lorenzo's voice cut through the space like a blade. Carlo. But Emma was already moving, not toward the gun. Toward the conveyor lever beside her. She pulled it. The old belt roared to life beneath Carlo's feet. He stumbled, firing wildly. Lorenzo shot the gun from his hand. The box flew from Carlo's grip. Emma lunged and caught it against her chest before it hit the floor, pain exploding through her burned palms. Lorenzo reached her as Carlo fell hard onto the platform, Dante's men swarming him seconds later. For a moment, Emma could only hold the box and breathe. Lorenzo's hands closed over her shoulders. You could have been shot, but I wasn't. That is not a defense. It worked for you earlier. He looked furious enough to kiss her or lock her in a tower, possibly both. Instead, because half the warehouse was watching, he settled for pulling her behind him while Dante restrained Carlo. Chiara stood nearby with a split lip, one hand gripping Bellini's collar as two guards took him. She looked at Emma and managed a shaky smile. I told you I was correcting it. Emma laughed through tears. Back at the villa near dawn, they opened the metal box inside Lorenzo's study. It contained Anne's full recorded confession, original identity documents, sealed bloodline records, the missing proof packet, and one final letter from Don Vittorio. Lorenzo read the first page, then stopped. What? Emma asked. He looked at her, expression unreadable. The will contains a condition. Her stomach sank. What condition? Lorenzo read aloud. For Amelia Moretti Belandi to assume emergency authority over both trusts, She must stand before the council unmarried, unclaimed, and free from alliance to either family, so no man may use her as a bridge for conquest. Silence filled the study. Emma understood slowly. Unmarried, unclaimed, free from alliance. Her gaze lifted to Lorenzo. His face had gone completely still. The will that gave her power to stop the war also warned against exactly what the room already knew was happening between them. If Emma chose Lorenzo, enemies could claim he had influenced her. If she chose authority, she had to stand apart from him. Carlo had not lied. The secret will might force her to choose between peace and love. Outside, sunrise touched the sea. Inside, Lorenzo Moretti looked at Emma as though someone had placed a knife between his heart and his honor. And Emma realized the next battle would not be fought with guns. The woman who chose for herself. The sunrise after the warehouse confrontation arrived quietly, as if the world had not spent the night tearing open secrets buried for nearly 3 decades. Golden light spilled across the cliffs below the Moretti villa, turning the sea into liquid fire, but inside the mansion nothing felt warm. Emma Carter sat alone in the private gallery where the hidden will had first been discovered, the metal box open beside her, and Anne Carter's confession letter resting across her lap. She had read it 6 times before dawn, then 6 more after. Every reading hurt differently. Anne had not stolen her. Anne had saved her. Yet saving her had required lies. Years of them. Emma had spent the night grieving a woman who had been dead for 3 years, and somehow grieving her all over again as if she had only just lost her. The truth had healed one wound and opened another. Across the gallery, the empty space where Don Vittorio's portrait once hung stared back at her like a scar in the wall. The old mafia king had hidden a future war behind a painting and expected a child to solve it when she grew up. Emma almost laughed at the absurdity. Instead, she folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the box. Footsteps approached. She knew who it was before she turned. Lorenzo Moretti had a way of carrying silence with him that no one else managed. He stopped a few feet away. Not close enough to touch, not far enough to pretend distance. The space between them had become its own battlefield. "You haven't slept," he said. Emma looked toward the sea. "Neither have you." That wasn't an answer. Neither was yours. A brief shadow of amusement crossed his face before disappearing. It hurt unexpectedly to see how tired he looked. Dark circles beneath his eyes. Stubble along his jaw. A bruise still fading beneath one cheekbone. For weeks he had fought enemies. Traitors, missing heirs, false alliances, attacks, and old ghosts. Now he faced something worse. Her. Or more precisely, the possibility of losing her. Lorenzo held a folded document in one hand. Emma recognized the council summons immediately. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow night." Her stomach tightened. Tomorrow. The council. The gathering of powerful men who would decide whether Emilia Moretti Bellondi existed in law as well as blood. Lorenzo placed the document on a nearby table. The final DNA confirmation arrived. Emma closed her eyes briefly. And 100% confirmation through both family lines. Silence settled between them. The last uncertainty was gone. No more maybe. No more possibility. She was Emilia Moretti Bellondi. The lost child. The heir. The bridge. Lorenzo watched her carefully. "Say something." Emma laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because words seemed inadequate. "I spent 28 years being ignored. Now entire criminal empires care about my existence." Lorenzo's gaze softened. "You were never invisible." Emma looked at him. Dangerous mistake. His eyes always made honesty harder to avoid. "Maybe not to you." Neither spoke for several seconds. The will's condition stood between them like another person in the room. Unmarried, unclaimed, free from alliance. Every glance felt complicated now. Every moment, every breath. Finally, Emma said, "You have to step back." The words landed exactly where she intended. Lorenzo's face hardened instantly. "No." "Yes." "No, Lorenzo." "Emma." She almost smiled despite herself. "We sound ridiculous. Then stop saying ridiculous things." The council will use us against each other. His jaw tightened. Let them try. You know that's not how this works. Her voice softened. If I stand beside you tomorrow, they will say you influenced me. You think I care what they say? I care. That stopped him. Emma stood slowly and crossed the room. Not close enough to touch, close enough to matter. My whole life, people decided things for me. My father, my mother, Vittorio, Bellini, Marco, Carlo, the council, even you. Lorenzo looked as if she had struck him. She continued before guilt could weaken her resolve. Most of the time you decided things because you wanted to protect me. I did protect you. I know. The admission came easily because it was true. But tomorrow I need to stand there without anyone's shadow over me, even yours. Silence. Lorenzo stared out toward the sea. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. You are asking me to watch people attack you and do nothing. I'm asking you to trust me. His eyes closed briefly. That, Emma realized, might be harder. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Lawyers arrived. Records were organized. Witness statements were reviewed. Ann Carter's confession was authenticated. The surviving portions of the baptism record were matched against the recovered identity documents. Dante tripled security. Rosa cooked enough food for an army no one touched. Chiara moved through the villa with a new purpose that surprised everyone, including herself. By afternoon, she requested a private meeting with Emma. This time, Lorenzo did not object. He wanted to. Emma could tell, but he remembered their conversation in the gallery. He stepped back, barely, reluctantly, but he did. Chiara waited in the conservatory surrounded by citrus trees and filtered sunlight. She looked nervous, which felt almost more alarming than when she was cruel. You wanted to see me? Emma asked. Chiara nodded. I found something. Emma sat across from her, 6'7". Good or bad? Chiara gave a humorless laugh. With this family? She handed over a folder. Inside were financial records, transfer authorizations, and private communications. Emma frowned. Marco. Chiara nodded. I knew he manipulated the contract. I didn't know how much. Emma read silently. Payments to Bellini, false intelligence sent to Carlo, hidden transfers from conflict accounts, manufactured attacks designed to keep the feud alive, dead men reduced to accounting strategies. Emma felt sick. How long? Years. Chiara looked away. He funded both sides. Emma stared at her. Both? Conflict makes money. Peace doesn't. The simplicity horrified her. Why are you giving me this? Chiara's answer came quietly. Because I helped him without realizing how far it went. And because if you stand before the council tomorrow without this evidence, Marco may survive. Emma looked at the woman who had mocked her weight, her clothes, her existence. Something had changed. Not enough to erase the past. Enough to matter. Thank you. Chiara blinked as if she had not expected forgiveness to sound so ordinary. Later that evening, Marco made his final mistake. He tried to flee Sicily. Dante's men intercepted him at a private marina with forged passports, hidden cash, and enough evidence in his luggage to bury 3 families. When Lorenzo received the call, he was in the library reviewing council procedures. Emma watched his expression change as Dante delivered the report. Alive? Lorenzo asked. Very, Dante answered through the speaker. Unfortunately for him, Lorenzo ended the call and looked toward Emma. It's over. Emma shook her head. No, it's not. He knew she was right. Marco's arrest removed a player. It did not end the game. That night Emma couldn't sleep. She wandered through the villa until she found herself on the western terrace overlooking the sea. Wind lifted her hair. Waves crashed against rocks below. For the first time in weeks, she was alone. Or so she thought. You always come here when you're thinking. Emma turned. Lorenzo stood in the doorway. No guards. No advisors. No obligations. Just him. You followed me. I own the terrace. She laughed softly. That isn't a denial. He walked closer. Not too close. The distance remained. It always would until after the council. Maybe longer. The realization hurt more than she expected. Lorenzo leaned against the stone railing. Are you afraid? Emma considered lying. Then remembered she had spent too much of her life doing that already. Yes. Good. She looked at him sharply. Good? People who aren't afraid before something important are usually idiots. Emma rolled her eyes. What a romantic thing to say. A faint smile appeared. I'm a mafia boss. Our standards are different. The smile vanished almost immediately. Emma. Her heart tightened. He rarely used her name that way. Softly. Carefully. Like it mattered. What? Lorenzo looked out toward the sea. Tomorrow, if the council turns against you, they won't. If they do, his voice lowered. I won't stand back. Emma studied him. You promised. I promised to trust you. I did not promise to enjoy it. Something inside her melted and broke simultaneously. She wanted to tell him not to worry. Wanted to tell him everything would be fine. Wanted to tell him she was terrified too. Instead, she said, I know. Lorenzo turned toward her then. Wind moved between them. Moonlight touched his face. The distance suddenly felt unbearable, yet neither crossed it. Because if they did, the council would win. The next evening arrived with rain. The council convened inside an ancient stone hall overlooking the sea, a neutral location used by powerful Sicilian families for generations. Moretti representatives, Bellandi representatives, Vitali representatives, lawyers, witnesses, advisors, men who had built fortunes from loyalty, fear, and violence. Emma entered alone. That was the first choice she made, not because Lorenzo was absent. He stood outside the hall with Dante, and enough security to invade a small country. But Emma crossed the threshold by herself. Every eye turned toward her. Some saw a servant. Some saw an heir. Some saw a threat. Emma saw only men who expected her to play a role written before she was born. The proceedings began. Evidence was presented. DNA results. Identity documents. Ann Carter's confession. The hidden will. The surviving baptism record. Marco's financial crimes. Bellini's surveillance. Carlo's involvement. Hours passed. Questions came like knives. Emma answered them all. Calmly. Clearly. Without Lorenzo's voice at her shoulder. Without anyone speaking for her. Then came the final challenge. An elderly council member rose slowly. You have Moretti blood. Bellandi blood. Legal standing. Fine. His eyes narrowed. But why should we trust you with authority over either family? Silence filled the hall. Emma looked around. At men who expected speeches about destiny, blood, legacy, power. She gave them none of those things. You shouldn't. The room stirred. The old man frowned. Emma continued. Not because of my blood. Murmurs spread. Not because of my name. More murmurs. And definitely not because a dead man wrote instructions. Now the room listened. Emma drew a slow breath. You should trust me because I'm the only person in this room who didn't spend years profiting from the feud. Silence. Complete silence. I wasn't raised to inherit it. I wasn't trained to exploit it. I wasn't paid by it. I cleaned floors while all of you argued over who owned what. Several council members looked uncomfortable. Good. Emma wasn't finished. And if that isn't enough, then don't trust me. She placed Marco's financial records on the table. Trust the evidence. Trust the money trails. Trust the graves. Trust the people who died so others could stay powerful. The room had no answer. Neither did the old man. For the first time, Emma realized something important. She did not need them to choose her. She only needed to stop them from choosing lies. The vote began. One by one, council members cast decisions. Recognition. Authority. Succession. Trust control. Emma sat alone while history moved around her. Outside the hall, Lorenzo waited. Inside, Emma made her final choice before the results were announced. She stood and addressed the council one last time. If authority is granted, my first action will be the suspension of all conflict funding between Moretti and Belandi interests. Gasps filled the room. Several men protested immediately. Emma ignored them. My second action will be a full audit of every account connected to Marco De Luca's operations. More protests. And my third action, she paused, will be the release of all compensation funds owed to families harmed during the feud. Silence followed. Not agreement. Shock. Because for the first time in decades, someone was choosing people over power. Outside, rain battered the stone windows. Inside, the votes continued. And somewhere beyond the council chamber doors, Lorenzo Moretti waited to learn whether the woman he loved had just changed Sicily forever. The fall of those who profited from hatred. The vote ended just before midnight. Rain hammered the stained glass windows of the council hall, while generations of power, greed, loyalty, and fear sat trapped beneath one stone roof waiting for the result. Emma Carter remained seated at the center table, hands folded carefully in front of her, refusing to let anyone see how hard her heart was pounding. Across the room, old men whispered behind polished folders. Lawyers exchanged documents. Family representatives stared at her as though she were either a miracle or a disaster. Perhaps she was both. Outside the hall, Lorenzo Moretti waited exactly where he promised he would, not beside her, not behind her, not speaking for her, but waiting. Somehow that mattered more than if he had stood at her shoulder. Emma had never realized how much strength there was in someone choosing to stay when they could not control the outcome. The council chairman finally rose. The room fell silent. Every eye turned forward. Emma forced herself to breathe. After review of all evidence, testimony, bloodline confirmation, legal documentation, witness statements, and financial records submitted to this council, the old man's voice echoed through the hall. The claim of Emilia Moretti Belandi is recognized. A murmur rolled across the room. Emma closed her eyes briefly, not because she was surprised, because hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way paperwork never could. The chairman continued. The authority granted under the Vittorio Moretti succession document is hereby validated. More voices. Louder this time. Some angry, some relieved, some frightened. Effective immediately, all conflict trust accounts identified within the succession framework shall be frozen pending audit and restructuring. That announcement detonated through the room. Several council members rose to their feet simultaneously. One man shouted. Another demanded an appeal. A third slammed his hand against the table. Emma remained seated. The chaos itself was confirmation. Too many people had grown rich from violence. Too many people had expected the war to last forever. The chairman struck his gavel repeatedly. Order. No one listened. Then Emma stood. She did not shout. She did not demand attention. She simply stood. Somehow the room noticed. Silence spread gradually. The same men who ignored each other stopped talking. The woman they once would have called a servant now held authority none of them expected. Emma looked across the hall. If you're angry because innocent families will finally receive compensation, stay angry. Silence deepened. If you're angry because secret accounts are being audited, ask yourself why. No one answered. And if you're angry because the feud might end, her voice remained calm, then perhaps you were never protecting your family. Perhaps you were protecting your income. Several faces darkened instantly. Good. The truth rarely arrived politely. The chairman cleared his throat. There remains the matter of criminal responsibility. Emma nodded. That was the part she had been waiting for. Marco De Luca, Bellini, the men who transformed grief into business, the men who manipulated both sides of a war for profit, the men who almost succeeded. Dante entered the hall moments later with 2 guards escorting Marco in handcuffs. Gasps spread through the chamber. Marco looked exhausted, disheveled, cornered. For the first time since Emma met him, he looked small. Not physically, spiritually. Like a man who suddenly realized he was no longer the smartest person in the room. His gaze found Emma immediately. Hatred flashed there. Then fear. Emma preferred the second one. The chairman gestured toward the evidence table. The financial records submitted by Miss Carter have been verified. Marco laughed bitterly. Of course they have. No one responded. The chairman continued. You stand accused of financing hostile operations between both families, facilitating fraud, manipulating succession procedures, obstructing inheritance law, conspiracy, attempted murder, evidence destruction, and treason against family interests. Marco's face hardened. Family interests? He laughed again. You all benefited. Several council members looked away. Emma noticed. So did everyone else. Marco's smile widened. That's right. None of you stopped the money while it flowed. The room shifted uncomfortably. Truth again. Ugly truth. The kind no one enjoyed hearing. Lorenzo entered then. Not dramatically, not as a rescuer. Simply because the council had completed its vote and his presence no longer compromised Emma's legitimacy. The moment he stepped into the hall, something changed. Even the loudest men lowered their voices. Lorenzo walked calmly toward the rear of the chamber and stood beside Dante. His eyes found Emma for only a second. Pride. Relief. Something deeper. Then his expression returned to neutral. The council proceedings continued. Bellini was brought in next. Unlike Marco, he looked terrified. Completely broken. The former house manager who once humiliated maids over dust now shook visibly while guards positioned him before the council. Emma felt no satisfaction watching it. Only disappointment. People like Bellini always imagined themselves powerful until the real consequences arrived. The evidence against him proved overwhelming. Surveillance logs, financial transfers, employment records, orders to track Emma for 11 months, the termination directive hidden within the files. Bellini tried denying everything until Dante produced his own ledger. Then he tried blaming Marco, then Carlo, then Vittorio. Then dead men. Finally, he blamed fear. I was following orders. The excuse landed heavily. Emma stood before anyone else could respond. So was my mother. Bellini looked up. The room turned silent again. Emma's voice remained steady. The difference is she followed orders to save a child. Bellini lowered his eyes. He had no answer, because there wasn't one. The council delivered its judgment shortly after dawn. Marco De Luca lost every title, voting privilege, financial claim, and succession right connected to both families. His assets were seized, his accounts frozen, his influence erased in a single morning. For a man who worshipped power, it was worse than prison. Marco listened without expression, but when guards moved to escort him away, he looked directly at Emma. You think you've won? Emma met his gaze calmly. No. Marco frowned. No? I think people can finally stop losing. For the first time, Marco looked genuinely confused, as if the concept itself made no sense. Then he was gone. Bellini's punishment followed. Permanent exile from all affiliated organizations, asset seizure, public disclosure of his crimes, lifetime exclusion from family territories. The former house manager who once controlled servants with fear left the chamber with nothing, not even dignity. By midday, news of the council's decisions had spread across Sicily, frozen accounts, compensation funds, criminal investigations, succession recognition. The old structure was beginning to crack. Not collapse, not yet, but crack, and cracks let light through. Emma returned to the villa exhausted beyond words. Rosa cried when she saw her. Chiara hugged her awkwardly before pretending she hadn't. Dante quietly informed her that 17 separate people had requested meetings regarding trust reforms. Emma immediately threatened to move to another continent. Dante appeared sympathetic. Lorenzo looked amused. That evening, the villa hosted a small private dinner. No politicians, no council members, no lawyers, just the people who survived. Rosa, Dante, Chiara, several trusted staff, Lorenzo, Emma. For the first time in weeks, the house felt almost peaceful. Not healed. Healing. There was a difference. Chiara raised a glass halfway through dinner. I would like to formally apologize. Everyone froze. Chiara sighed dramatically. Don't make this harder. Rosa immediately started smiling. Emma tried not to, failed. Chiara pointed toward her. I treated you terribly. You did. Thank you for agreeing so quickly. Emma laughed. The table joined her. Chiara rolled her eyes. My point is that I was wrong. The admission seemed painful, which made it more meaningful. And? Dante asked. Chiara glared at him. And I'm sorry. Emma nodded. Accepted. Chiara blinked. Just like that? Life is short. Chiara looked suspicious. That sounds like a trap. Probably. The table laughed again. Even Lorenzo. Briefly. The evening continued with stories, memories, arguments, and enough food to feed a wedding. Yet beneath the warmth lingered one unresolved truth. The will's condition. Unmarried, unclaimed, free from alliance. Emma felt it every time her eyes found Lorenzo across the table. Every time silence stretched too long. Every time one of them looked away first. Later that night, long after the others retired, Emma wandered back to the western terrace overlooking the sea. The storm had finally passed. Stars reflected across the water. Wind carried salt and silence. She wasn't surprised when Lorenzo appeared. Some habits had become predictable. He stood beside her at the railing. Neither spoke immediately. The ocean filled the space between words. Finally, Lorenzo said, "You did well." Emma smiled faintly. "That's the closest thing to a compliment I've heard from you all week. I complimented you yesterday. You threatened 3 council members. They were being rude." Emma laughed softly. Then the laughter faded. The silence returned. Different this time. Heavier. Lorenzo rested both hands on the stone railing. The council approved everything. Mostly. Mostly. Another pause. Emma stared out at the sea. You stepped back. Lorenzo said nothing. She looked toward him. "Thank you." He met her eyes. "It was the hardest thing I've done in years." Her heart squeezed. The honesty in his voice made looking away impossible. "I know." "No." He shook his head. "I don't think you do." The air shifted. Emma felt it immediately. Dangerous territory. Necessary territory. Lorenzo turned fully toward her. "Watching you walk into that hall alone." His jaw tightened. "I hated it." Emma smiled sadly. "I noticed. Every instinct I have told me to follow you. I know. Every instinct I have still tells me that." The words settled between them. Neither moved. Neither looked away. The stars reflected across the sea below. Somewhere behind them, the villa slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Then Dante's voice shattered the moment. "Boss." Both turned. Dante stood in the doorway looking mildly apologetic, which meant the situation was terrible. "What happened?" Lorenzo asked immediately. Dante stepped forward. His expression had changed. Serious now. "We found Carlo Balandi." Silence. Emma's pulse quickened. "Where?" Dante looked directly at her. He wasn't running. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Dante handed over a sealed envelope. "He left this." Emma accepted it carefully. Her name was written across the front. Not Amelia. Not heir. Not successor. Emma. Inside was a single page. She read it once, then again. Then a third time because the words made no sense. Lorenzo took the letter from her hands. His face hardened as he read. "Impossible." Emma looked toward him. "What?" Dante frowned. "What does it say?" Lorenzo lowered the page slowly. "Carlo claims Vittorio hid something else." Emma's stomach dropped. Of course he did. Because apparently no one in this family had ever met a secret they didn't like. "What thing?" Lorenzo looked at her. The expression in his eyes told her she wasn't going to enjoy the answer. "A second will." Silence. Complete silence. Then Emma closed her eyes. "You've got to be kidding me." But no one was laughing. "The second will." The word second will change the air on the western terrace more completely than any gunshot could have. Emma Carter stood beneath the open Sicilian sky with Carlo Balandi's letter in her hand, the sea breathing black and silver below the cliffs. and suddenly the victory of the council felt like a candle flame in a storm. Lorenzo Moretti read the letter again, his face hardening line by line, while Dante waited at the terrace doors with the expression of a man who had already begun preparing for bad news to become worse. Emma wanted to laugh. She truly did. A tired, almost hysterical laugh from a woman who had survived hidden wills, burned nurseries, armed attacks, DNA revelations, warehouse traps, council judgment, and a condition that kept her heart standing carefully apart from the man beside her. But no laughter came. Only one exhausted sentence. Your father had a terrible filing system. Lorenzo looked at her. For one brief second, his mouth almost moved. Apparently, Dante cleared his throat. Carlo says the second will is hidden where Vittorio buried his first betrayal. Emma looked at him. That is not a location. That's poetry for criminals. Old mafia men enjoy drama, Dante said. Lorenzo folded the letter slowly. My father's first betrayal was not hiding you. Emma's heart tightened. Then what was it? His gaze moved toward the dark villa behind them. My mother. Silence fell. Emma knew little about Lorenzo's mother. Only that she had died when he was young, that her portrait was never displayed in the public rooms, and that no one mentioned her unless they wanted Lorenzo's face to become unreadable. Dante's eyes shifted slightly, confirming this was dangerous ground. Lorenzo looked out over the sea. She was Belandi by birth. Emma stopped breathing for half a second. Your mother was Belandi? Yes. Then you. Already carry both bloodlines. The words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Moretti and Belandi. The same impossible bridge they had believed only Emma represented. Why didn't anyone say that? Emma whispered. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Because my father erased her name after she died. Dante's voice lowered. Officially, Donna Isabella Moretti was listed as distant nobility from the north. Her Belandi birth records were sealed. Emma stared at Lorenzo. Everything shifted again. The will's condition. The warning against alliance. The fear of someone using her as conquest. The idea that Emma alone could unite the families. But if Lorenzo himself already carried both bloodlines, then the council had been manipulated by an incomplete truth. Then why did Vittorio make me the bridge? She asked. Lorenzo looked at her, and something old moved through his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or guilt inherited from a father who was no longer alive to answer. Because my mother's blood was used to start the war, not end it. They searched the sealed family crypt before dawn. It lay beneath the oldest chapel on the estate, far below the polished rooms where guests drank wine and lied with perfect posture. The crypt smelled of stone, salt, and extinguished candles. Names of the Moretti dead lined the walls in carved marble plaques, but one space near the back had been left blank, not empty, deliberately unfinished. Lorenzo stopped in front of it. His torchlight trembled only slightly against the stone. Emma noticed. She always noticed. Your mother? She asked softly. He nodded once. Her body was never placed here. My father said burial arrangements were private. Dante moved closer to the blank wall and ran a gloved hand along the marble edge. There is a seam. It took 20 minutes to open the hidden compartment behind the blank burial space. Inside was not a coffin, not bones, not jewels, but a narrow iron case sealed with two crests pressed into wax. Moretti and Belandi, side by side. Emma felt the symbolism before anyone spoke. Not war, not conquest. Union. Lorenzo stared at the seal as if it had reached across decades to strike him. He hid her here, he said. Emma's voice softened. Or he hid what she left. The case opened with the old silver key from Vittorio's metal box. Inside lay a second will, a bundle of letters, and a miniature portrait of a young woman with dark eyes and a sorrowful mouth. Isabella Belandi Moretti, Lorenzo's mother. Emma looked from the portrait to Lorenzo and saw the resemblance immediately, not in the shape of his face but in the eyes. The same guarded sadness, the same strength used as armor. Lorenzo did not touch the portrait at first. Then, slowly, he picked it up with a gentleness that made Emma's throat ache. Dante looked away. Emma almost did too, but Lorenzo met her gaze. He allowed her to witness it. That felt like trust. The second will was written in Vittorio Moretti's hand, dated 1 year after the official will and 1 month before his death. Lorenzo read silently at first. Then his expression changed so sharply that Emma stepped closer. "What?" He continued reading, then handed the document to her without a word. Emma took it carefully. The legal language was dense, but the emotional truth beneath it was devastating. Vittorio had not written the second will to give more power. He had written it to confess. His wife Isabella had not died naturally. She had been murdered by the same men who later profited from the Moretti-Belandi feud. Vittorio believed Carlo Belandi and several Moretti trustees arranged her death to prevent her from exposing the conflict accounts that paid both sides to keep fighting. Vittorio's first betrayal had been silence. He had known enough to suspect the truth, but lacked proof. Instead of facing the families openly, he buried Isabella's name, hid Emma, rewrote succession structures, and tried to create legal traps that would one day force the truth into daylight. Emma's hands tightened on the paper. He built all of this because he was afraid. Lorenzo's voice was cold. He built all of this because he was a coward. The word echoed through the crypt. Dante said nothing. Emma looked at the letters. Maybe. But cowards don't usually leave maps to their own shame. Lorenzo's eyes flashed. "Do not defend him to me." She held his gaze, heart pounding. "I'm not. I'm trying to understand the damage before we decide what to do with it." For a long moment, the crypt seemed too small for both their griefs. Then Lorenzo looked away first, breathing hard through his nose. "Read the rest." Emma did. The second will contain one final clause that destroyed the condition keeping them apart. Vittorio had required Emilia to stand unmarried, unclaimed, and free from alliance only until her authority was validated before the council. Once recognized, no personal relationship could invalidate her power unless coercion was proven by evidence. Emma read the sentence 3 times before her mind accepted it. The condition had not been a lifetime sentence. It had been a shield for the council moment. She looked up slowly. Lorenzo was watching her. He already knew. So, her voice caught. "So after last night, no one can use me against your claim," he said. The crypt fell silent again. But this silence was different. Not easy. Never easy. But alive with something they had both been refusing to touch. Emma's heart beat painfully. "You knew when you read it?" "Yes." "And you said nothing?" His expression tightened. "You needed to finish reading the truth before I made it about us." That answer undid her more than any romantic declaration could have. Because Lorenzo Moretti, a man raised to claim, conquer, protect, and control, had chosen restraint again, had chosen her truth before his desire. Emma looked down at the second will before tears could betray her. There is more. Dante stepped closer as she unfolded the final letter. This one was not addressed to Lorenzo. It was addressed to Emilia. Emma read aloud, voice shaking only slightly. "If you are standing with this document in your hands, then the men who fed on hatred have failed to kill you. That means you are already stronger than the name they tried to erase. Do not let my son, my enemies, my guilt, or my blood decide what you become. If you choose peace, make them pay for war. If you choose power, make it serve the weak. If you choose love, choose it freely. No will should bind a living woman more tightly than the dead already have." The last words faded into the stone. Emma closed her eyes. "If you choose love, choose it freely." Lorenzo did not move. Perhaps he understood that moving too soon would feel like pressure. Perhaps he was fighting every instinct that told him to reach for her. Emma knew him well enough now to know both were true. Dante's radio crackled, breaking the moment. He listened, then looked grim. Carlo wasn't found because he wanted to be. He planted the letter. Lorenzo turned immediately. "Where is he?" "Not at the safe house, not on the roads. We just intercepted movement near the old council hall." Emma's blood chilled. "The council hall?" Dante nodded. "Several trustees are still there, finalizing the account freezes." Lorenzo's face became ice. "He is destroying records." Emma shook her head slowly. "No. He is destroying people who can confirm them." They reached the council hall just before noon. Smoke already curled from the lower archive windows. Carlo Belandi had not come alone. He had brought men loyal not to family but to the old money networks, the ones that died if Emma's reforms survived. The attack was not chaotic like the villa breach. It was surgical. Archive rooms burning. Witnesses locked inside side chambers. Digital servers smashed. Men in council robes held at gunpoint while Carlo stood beneath the stone crest of both families, looking elegant, furious, and finally cornered. "Emilia," he called when Emma entered beside Lorenzo and Dante. "You should have stayed a ghost." Lorenzo lifted his weapon instantly. Emma touched his arm. He did not lower the gun, but he did not fire. That was enough. Emma stepped forward. "Your war is over, Carlo." He laughed. "War is never over. It changes accountants. Not this time. You think freezing accounts ends hatred? No." Emma's voice steadied. "But it ends the payments." His smile disappeared. Around them, Dante's men moved into position. Lorenzo watched Carlo with lethal patience. "Surrender," Lorenzo said. Carlo sneered. "To the son of Isabella Belandi? How poetic." "Did you enjoy learning you're as much enemy as king?" Lorenzo's face did not change, but Emma felt the blow. Carlo continued. "Your mother begged us to stop the accounts. Begged like a saint. So we made her one. Buried, mourned, and useless." The room seemed to go still. Lorenzo's entire body tightened. Emma knew what Carlo wanted. Rage. A shot fired in front of witnesses. A reason to say Lorenzo was unstable, violent, unfit to oversee reforms. A final manipulation. She stepped between them. Lorenzo's breath changed behind her. "Move," he said quietly. "No." "Emma, he wants you to become the man he says you are." Carlo smiled. "Listen to the housekeeper, Lorenzo. She has learned quickly." Emma looked at him. "And you have learned nothing." Carlo's smile faltered. "You still think power is who holds the gun. That's why you lost to a woman who used to polish your enemy's floors." Silence struck harder than shouting. Carlo's eyes went black with rage. He raised his weapon toward her. Lorenzo moved. Dante moved. Chiara, appearing from the side corridor with 2 council guards she had freed moments earlier, shouted a warning. The gunshot cracked across the hall. For one horrifying second, Emma thought she had been hit. Then Carlo staggered backward, his gun falling from his hand. Dante's shot had struck his shoulder. Lorenzo's had shattered the stone near his head, close enough to warn, not kill. Carlo fell to his knees under a storm of commands as guards swarmed him. He looked up at Emma with hatred and disbelief. "You could have ruled both families." Emma stepped closer, trembling but upright. "I still can." His eyes narrowed. "Then why not take everything?" She looked at Lorenzo, then at Chiara helping an elderly councilman from the smoke, then at Dante securing witnesses, then at the burned archive doors and the families who had paid for rich men's grudges, because everything was never the point. Carlo was dragged away. This time there would be no message, no warehouse, no bargaining. He had confessed in front of the council, attacked under witness, and revealed the murder of Lorenzo's mother before men who could no longer pretend not to know. The true mastermind behind the feud's continuation had finally exposed himself, not because Emma outgunned him, but because she refused to play the role he wrote for her. By evening, the second will had been entered into council record. Isabella Bellondi Moretti's murder investigation reopened. The conflict accounts permanently dissolved. Carlo Bellondi stripped of authority, assets, and protection. Every trustee tied to the war network removed. Marco's remaining allies abandoned him before sunset. Bellini's testimony became unnecessary, though Dante said he gave it anyway after hearing Carlo had fallen. Chiara, to everyone's surprise, was publicly credited for saving 2 council witnesses and privately threatened to become insufferable about it. Rosa cried when Emma returned to the villa. Dante pretended dust had entered both eyes. Lorenzo said nothing for a long time. He simply stood in the gallery where everything had begun, holding his mother's portrait in one hand and the second will in the other. Emma found him there after midnight. The portrait of Don Vittorio was gone. In its place, temporarily resting against the wall, was Isabella's miniature portrait waiting to be enlarged and properly framed. "She should be here," Emma said softly. Lorenzo looked at the portrait. Yes, not hidden. No, the silence between them was no longer filled with conditions, only choices. Emma stepped beside him. "The second will said I can choose freely." Lorenzo's eyes closed briefly. Yes, and you are being very careful not to influence me. I am trying. How painful for you. His mouth curved faintly, extremely. Emma's heart trembled. Then she turned to face him fully. Ask me anyway. Lorenzo went still. Emma, not as a condition, not as an alliance, not as a claim. Her voice softened. Ask me as a woman who has already chosen her own name. For the first time since she had known him, Lorenzo Moretti looked almost afraid. Then he reached for her slowly, giving her every chance to step away. She did not. His hand touched her cheek with astonishing care. Then stay, he said, voice rough. Not because of this house, not because of blood, not because my father dragged us into the same war. His thumb brushed her skin. Stay because when you walk into a room, I remember what it feels like to want something clean in a world that taught me to love only power. Emma's breath caught. That is not a question. No. His eyes held hers. It is the truth before the question. Tears filled her eyes despite herself. Then ask. Lorenzo leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. Emma Carter. Emilia Moretti Belandi. Whatever name you choose tomorrow and every day after. His voice lowered. Will you choose me? The question broke through every wall she had left. Not own, not claim, not command. Choose. Emma rose onto her toes and kissed him. For one breath, Lorenzo froze. As if the most feared mafia boss in Sicily had finally encountered something he did not know how to survive. Then his arms came around her, careful at first, then fiercely, holding her like a vow he had no intention of breaking. When she pulled back, she whispered against his mouth. Yes. His eyes opened, dark and unguarded. Say it again. Emma smiled through tears. Yes, Lorenzo, I choose you. Outside the gallery, someone made a strangled sound. Dante, Rosa, possibly Chiara, maybe all three. Lorenzo closed his eyes with long-suffering patience. Emma laughed, and the sound filled the room where secrets had once hidden behind crooked frames. The second will had not taken anything from her. It had returned the one thing every lie had stolen. Choice. And tomorrow, she would decide what to do with power. Tonight, she chose love. The home behind the painting. 6 months later, the villa overlooking the Sicilian coast no longer felt like a monument to old secrets. It felt alive. The transformation had not happened overnight. Wars that lasted decades did not disappear because one council voted, one villain fell, or one hidden will emerged from behind a painting. Peace required work, endless work, paperwork, arguments, audits, meetings, reforms, accountability. Emma Carter discovered very quickly that saving a family was significantly more exhausting than cleaning up after one. Yet every morning when she walked through the eastern gardens and saw workers restoring old fountains instead of repairing bullet damage, she knew the effort mattered. The conflict accounts were gone. The compensation funds had reached hundreds of families harmed by the feud. Schools reopened in villages previously abandoned during territorial disputes. Medical clinics funded by the dissolved war trusts now served communities that once received only threats and funerals. It wasn't perfect. Some people still hated, some still blamed, some still dreamed of revenge. But hatred no longer arrived with a payroll attached. And that changed everything. Emma stood in the former council chamber of the villa, reviewing reports with Dante, who had reluctantly accepted a new position overseeing trust security and compliance. He hated paperwork almost as much as Emma hated public speeches. Unfortunately, they were both very good at those things. 3 more properties transferred to community management, Dante said. 2 disputes resolved, 1 lawsuit threatened. Emma looked up. Only 1? Dante nodded. Slow day. Emma laughed. We're improving. Dante pretended not to smile. The office door opened. Chiara entered, carrying 2 folders and enough confidence to power a small city. Over the past months, she had reinvented herself with the same determination she once devoted to social climbing. Now she managed several charitable initiatives connected to the compensation program and spent most of her time frightening accountants. Good news, Chiara announced. The education fund passed. Emma brightened immediately. Really? Really? Chiara placed the paperwork on the desk. Apparently threatening 12 board members with public embarrassment remains effective. Dante looked impressed. You missed your calling. No, Chiara replied. I found it. The answer surprised all three of them. Then Emma smiled, because it was true. Later that afternoon, Emma walked through the gallery where everything had begun. The crooked painting was gone. In its place hung a restored portrait of Isabella Bellondi Moretti, Lorenzo's mother, displayed openly where everyone could see her. No more hidden names, no more erased histories. Below the portrait rested a small plaque containing a simple inscription: Truth survives longer than fear. Emma paused before it. She often did. The gallery doors opened quietly behind her. She didn't need to turn around. Some footsteps had become familiar enough to recognize anywhere. You're hiding from meetings. Lorenzo Moretti's voice carried amusement now. 6 months earlier, that alone would have shocked half of Sicily. Emma faced him. I'm reflecting. You're hiding. Maybe both. He approached slowly. Not because he needed permission anymore. Because old habits of respect had become natural between them. Lorenzo stopped beside her and looked up at his mother's portrait. She would have liked you. Emma's heart softened. You don't know that. I do. How? Lorenzo looked toward the inscription. Because she spent her life trying to make powerful men tell the truth. Emma laughed. That does sound familiar. His gaze shifted toward her, warm now, open in ways she once believed impossible. The feared mafia boss had not become less dangerous. He had simply become honest about what he protected and why. Sometimes that felt even more powerful. Come with me, he said. Emma narrowed her eyes immediately. That sounds suspicious. It is. Excellent, you'll like this one. Now I trust you even less. Lorenzo smiled fully this time. A rare thing, still capable of stopping Emma's heart whenever it happened. He led her through the western gardens, past olive trees and restored stone walls, toward a section of the estate she had not visited in weeks. Construction crews had worked there for months under unusual secrecy. Every time she asked questions, Lorenzo became mysteriously busy. Every time Dante almost answered, Lorenzo threatened his employment. Emma suspected bribery. Now the work stood finished. She stopped walking. The small building before her overlooked the sea. White stone, warm wood, large windows, flowers growing along the pathway. Modest compared to the villa, perfect compared to everything else. Emma stared. What is this? Lorenzo looked almost nervous. The realization alone was worth preserving forever. You once told Rosa you never wanted to live in a palace. Emma blinked. You listened to that conversation? I listened to many conversations. That's concerning. Focus. She tried, failed briefly, then looked back at the house. Lorenzo. He exhaled slowly. The villa belongs to history. Councils. Meetings. Family politics. Problems. Emma's chest tightened. And this? His eyes held hers. This belongs to us. For 1 second she couldn't speak, couldn't breathe properly, couldn't process the fact that the most feared man in Sicily had secretly built her a home because she once admitted she preferred something smaller. Tears appeared immediately. Completely unfair. You built a house. Yes. Without telling me. Yes. You realize communication is generally recommended in healthy relationships? Lorenzo considered this. I'm still learning. Emma laughed through tears, then kissed him before he could attempt another defense. The house became their refuge. Not a replacement for responsibility, a reminder of why responsibility mattered. Emma continued overseeing reforms. Lorenzo continued dismantling the last remnants of the old conflict networks. Dante remained perpetually overworked. Chiara became increasingly impossible to intimidate. Rosa adopted half the staff whether they wanted adoption or not. Life moved forward. Not perfectly. But honestly, 1 year after the council vote, the final investigation into Isabella Moretti's murder concluded. The truth became public. The remaining conspirators lost everything. Families received answers they had waited decades to hear. More importantly, the lies stopped reproducing themselves. The war finally lost its storytellers. The following spring, Emma stood once again before the sea, this time wearing a simple ivory dress instead of servant black. The ceremony was small by Sicilian standards and enormous by Lorenzo's. Rosa cried from the first minute to the last. Dante looked uncomfortable whenever emotions appeared within a 10-foot radius. Chiara claimed she would not cry, and lost that argument almost immediately. The guests gathered beneath olive trees overlooking the water. No political alliances, no strategic marriages, no council pressure, no inheritance conditions, just choice. Emma looked toward Lorenzo as he waited at the end of the path, the same man who once fired a maid because he trusted no one, the same man who stood between her and gunfire, the same man who learned that protection without trust becomes another kind of cage, the same man she chose freely. Lorenzo watched her approach with an expression no council, enemy, or hidden will could ever control. Love. Simple. Undeniable. Human. When Emma reached him, he took her hands carefully, still mindful of scars that had long since healed. You know, she whispered, this entire story started because a painting was crooked. Lorenzo nodded. And because a housekeeper was curious. And because a mafia boss was impossible. Also true. Laughter spread through the guests. Emma smiled. The sea sparkled behind them. The wind carried salt and sunlight. Somewhere in the restored villa, Isabella's portrait watched over a family finally telling the truth. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, people whose lives had been shaped by old hatred were beginning again. And standing here, Emma finally understood something her mother had tried to teach without words. Love was never the opposite of truth. Real love survived truth. Sometimes it even required it. The ceremony ended. The celebration began. Music drifted through the gardens. Rosa fed enough guests for 3 weddings. Chiara danced with an accountant she swore she wasn't interested in. Dante disappeared whenever anyone mentioned romance. Lorenzo pulled Emma toward the edge of the terrace as the sun began setting over the Mediterranean. Happy? He asked softly. Emma looked around. The sea, the family they built, the future they chose, the home behind the painting. Then she looked back at him. Very. Lorenzo kissed her beneath the Sicilian sunset, while the last shadows of the old feud disappeared into history. For the first time in a very long time, no secrets waited behind the walls. No wills waited behind paintings. No ghosts waited in the dark. Only a future. And this time, it belonged to them. The end. If you enjoyed Emma and Lorenzo's journey from hidden secrets and dangerous betrayals to truth, healing, and love, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and tell us which moment touched you the most. Was it the discovery behind the painting? Anne Carter's heartbreaking confession? Lorenzo's declaration of protection? Or the moment Emma finally chose her own future? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next emotional mafia romance story. And if you love stories filled with hidden heirs, powerful mafia bosses, family secrets, redemption, and unforgettable happy endings, stay with us because another incredible journey is just around the corner.